Us desperately wanting our houseplants to do well is the exact thing that's killing them. There are 5 reasons why your houseplants are dying as soon as you repot them. The first reason is time. Where are these houseplants coming from? You're basically ripping them from the most perfect greenhouse conditions. Temperature and humidity controlled, with all the light they could ever ask for. Plants are used to these perfect conditions only to be ripped out, sent on a truck, straight to Walmart, and then into your home. Even with amazing windows, there's no way to compete against greenhouse conditions. Your plant needs time to adjust to these new conditions, so instead of giving it some time, you're taking it out of its pot, disturbing its roots, trying to give it more space to grow. Your plant would have preferred much more time to get used to its new environment. And once your plant has finally stabilized and puts out consistent, healthy new growth, then you can consider making those changes. I generally give the advice to wait between 2 to 3 months before making any changes to your new houseplant. This usually gives enough time to see any changes with your new plant, like dying leaves, pests, or fungal infections.
No one can tell you when it's time to repot your own plant, despite how many times you take a picture of it and send it into Reddit.
Does this need to be repotted? How do I know when to repot it? New baby.
Unless you have X-ray vision, there's no way that you can tell if your plant is ready to be repotted.
Does my Monstera need repotting?
Oh, actually yes, now I can tell you. The second reason why your plants keep dying after repot is because you need to see what the roots actually look like. And short of using a plastic see-through pot like this, you need to actually pop the plant out and see what the roots are like. And the second best way is just by, I guess, growing these plants for years in the same environment, figuring out how fast they grow, how fast the roots grow, so you know exactly what it's going to look like, but otherwise, you're pretty much just guessing. This Monstera albo I've had in the same 6-inch terracotta pot for over a year now. It's gone through a lot of thrips infestations, but I think it's finally clean, so when I take it out of the pot, I'm going to assume that the roots are pretty good, but maybe not as full as I would like them to be. Yeah, seems like I guessed right. So my goal now is to remove some of the soil to see what's going on, because I do have this new plastic pot that I want to put it in. I've got some really great healthy looking roots, but from what I can see, a lot of the peat-based soil is actually gone. It seems to be mostly perlite, a few of my orchid bark chunks, and a little bit of horticultural charcoal. So I think with this, it should be good enough to upsize. From what I can see, the roots seem to be taking up around 60%, but considering my soil mix is so chunky, I feel pretty comfortable with a slight size up. So it's going from a 6-inch terracotta to a 7-inch plastic pot. So not checking your roots leads a lot of people to just buying up all the materials that they need to go up a size in their pot, just assuming that their plant is ready. But when they get to this stage and then they see maybe my plant doesn't actually have enough roots for me to go up, they say, I already went through all the trouble of getting all these materials, I'm not going back into the same pot, or go down a pot size even. I think it's time to repot. And that's where most of us get into big trouble. I really think a lot of novice growers should probably get into the habit of waiting until their roots take up about 80% of the space in their pot. Especially if you're using just whatever basic potting soil that you can find. Now, if your potting soil is filled with a lot of extra amendments like mine is, like large perlite chunks, orchid bark, horticultural charcoal, and even coco coir chunks, you can get away with waiting until your roots take a lot less of the pot, around 60 to 70%. But waiting longer is generally the safer choice for you. Plant goes in, bottom's got a little bit of soil. Put in the elbow. From here, I generally like to retie the plant to make it more stable. And this one has 2 stems. So my first couple ties will be stabilizing both of the bottom ones. Then I'll just do the top one quickly. I'll start to fill in all of the extra space with my new soil. So obviously if you have a smaller size plant, this is going to be a lot easier to just pop it out of the soil quickly check to see what it looks like, and if it's not ready, you can put it back in. But in the event that you do inherit an extremely large plant, obviously you can't just pop it out of the soil and pop it back in quickly. So what I suggest is coming prepared with a smaller size pot, the same size pot, and then a larger size pot, just in case you need to plant in one of those different sizes. If your large plant is in a plastic pot, oftentimes you might need to destroy the plastic pot just to get the plant out. So that's why you should become prepared with all eventualities.
You might already know that plants love consistency, but one thing that even I keep forgetting is remembering what the plant originally came with. Many plants coming directly from a nursery might be coming with unfamiliar soil. Now, I think this is coco coir. Coco coir is extremely light, drains well, provides lots of oxygen to the roots, and is often used as a peat-based alternative for potting soil. A lot of growers use coco coir as a medium because it's really cheap and it does extremely well performing inside of greenhouse conditions. Now, a big problem with coco coir is that it's generally not available in most garden centers or big box stores. I usually have to come to my local mom and pop store or go to hydroponic stores to find this sort of medium. An even bigger problem with coco coir is that unlike greenhouses, your house is probably not extremely bright and not extremely warm. So this medium can often stay wet for longer periods of time, which ends up killing off the roots of your plant. To make matters even worse, when you try to repot your new plant, you're probably going to go with a more available peat-based potting soil. Now, because of the consistency of those two soils being different, your soil is drying out at two different rates. And if you're still using that mostly useless finger test to see if your plant is still dry, the outer circle that's a mostly peat-based potting soil can be drier, and then the inside ring, which is coco coir, can still be soaking wet.
Choosing the wrong pot is such a huge issue that I made an entire video about it. I'll leave a link in the description, but the summary is this. People think that moving up to a larger pot size is good for their plant, but in reality, all of that extra soil that's surrounding your roots is what's killing it. And despite me going into great detail about how your roots need oxygen and excessively wet soil lacks oxygen, and that lack of oxygen is what creates a breeding ground for bacteria that kills your roots, I still constantly got this one, "Ha, gotcha" comment.
This just isn't true. Earth is the biggest pot size and plants outdoors are doing just fine.
I see the logic, but listen. Despite plants living in soil, roots still need oxygen to survive. Outdoors, you have insects like decomposers, you have beneficial bacteria, you have fungus, and all of these things are working together to create a more oxygen-rich environment for the plant's roots. Indoors, you have nowhere near those levels of beneficial bacteria or fungus to make a tiny plant be able to survive in such a giant pot.
Okay, fine. I'll just put earthworms in my pot then.
Please don't. Don't do that. That's weird. That's weird. Now, plastic pots can be great if you need something inexpensive, lightweight, reusable, and easy to store. Now, while they don't get rid of excess water like terracotta does, if you go with clear plastic, you can easily monitor the roots and how they're doing from a clear plastic pot. I've been using plastic pots for my Monstera Thai constellation because I decided to go with a peat-free medium, and because it's my first time with a peat-free medium, I really wanted to be able to monitor the roots and see how they're doing. Now, these pots are really great. They're actually orchid pots, and I got them from a local hydroponic store. The orchid pots have these slots in it for extra oxygen access to the roots. Originally, I had planned to go for a pot size upgrade, but these orchid pots only seem to get wider and not necessarily deeper, and I do want the roots to stop bunching up around the bottom, so instead of this one, I'm going to go for this taller clear pot upgrade. So for my peat-free soil mix for this Thai constellation, basically all that means is I'm avoiding potting soil. So I'm going to start with a little bit of horticultural charcoal. Followed by some orchid bark. So technically this is just an orchid mix, so while it's not pure bark, there are things like cocoa chunks and coco coir in here as well. I also have my extra large perlite, some cocoa fiber chunks. So this does seem like a really great mix, but I think it could use a little bit extra tree fern fiber just to add a little bit more moisture retention to it. Right now I'm aiming to water this plant at around 3 to 4 days, which is pretty good for my personal preference. Sometimes you can make your soil to suit your own watering habits. If I wanted to be even more hands-off with my plants, I probably wouldn't do a peat-free mix. I just add more things that are moisture retaining, and then I could get away with watering my plant, say every 7 days. Going with my cedar plank as usual. Layer a bit of the mix at the bottom. Put the Thai constellation in with the back of the plant facing the pole, just like this. Fill in the rest with my soilless mix. It's sometimes easier to see with a plastic pot, but it may be the case that there are different kind of air pockets. So just doing this around the front, around the sides of the plant will push things down. And if you find yourself having a lot more space in the pot after you've done that, you can always just take more of your soil mix, add some more on top, maybe go through it one last time. Once you water it, some of the soil may settle even more. You can do it a second time, but from there, you pretty much have the perfect repot.
If you want your plants, especially your monstera, to do the best, then they should be in front of your brightest window. I made this video like 3 years ago about how your plant needs more sun. But one thing I didn't mention is that people who have their plant in such low light for so many years, as soon as they make a single change to their plant, it starts dying. It could be the most mild pot size upgrade with new soil or even a terracotta planter. If the plant has been dying for so many years, a small change can just accelerate that process. The truth is that plants need a minimum amount of light to survive. Maybe your plant was in the middle of a room or off in a corner somewhere, but your plant has been dying slowly for months. It wasn't necessarily the repot that killed it, but it did definitely speed up the process. In the Kill This Plant Discord server, which you should definitely join, we have resources that can help you figure out exactly how much light that you'll need. Also consider getting a grow light like my favorite, the Soltech Vita bulb, and check the description for a discount code. Bright indirect light is a lie, and I actually think it makes most new plant parents move their plants farther away from the window because they think that's what's best for them. When in reality, I think that most people don't have big enough windows to do any kind of damage to their plant, especially if they're getting them adjusted to light slowly. Potted plants that live outdoors with high light, heat, and temperature always have more successful repots because they can adjust to their new conditions much faster. More light can pretty much negate all bad repotting habits. More light makes bad pot size choices and bad soil choices not so much of a big deal for your plant. So if you want your plant to survive the repot, just give it more light.